There are various names of Korea in use today, derived from ancient kingdoms and dynasties. The modern English name Korea is an exonym derived from the Goryeo period and is used by both North Korea and South Korea in international contexts. In the Korean language, the two Koreas use different terms to refer to the nominally unified nation, Chosŏn in North Korea, and Hanguk in South Korea. History. The earliest records of Korean history are written in Chinese characters called Hanja. Even after the invention of Hangul, Koreans generally recorded native Korean names with Hanja, by translation of meaning, transliteration of sound, or even combinations of the two. Furthermore, the pronunciations of the same character are somewhat different in Korean and the various Korean dialects, and have changed over time. For all these reasons, in addition to the sparse and sometimes contradictory written records, it is often difficult to determine the original meanings or pronunciations of ancient names. Ancient history Joseon, until 108 BC, northern Korea and Manchuria were controlled by Joseon. In contemporaneous Chinese records, it was written as Eoe, which is pronounced in modern Korean as Joseon. Go, meaning ancient, distinguishes it from the later Joseon dynasty. The name Joseon is also now still used by North Koreans and Koreans living in China to refer to the peninsula, and is the official Korean form of the name of Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The word is also used in many Eurasian languages to refer to Korea, such as Japanese, Vietnamese, and Chinese. Possibly the Chinese characters phonetically transcribed a native Korean name, perhaps pronounced something like Joseon. Some speculate that it also corresponds to Chinese references to E 1/4, Ce 1/4 and E 1/4, although these latter names probably describe the ancestors of the Joseon. Other scholars believe Eoe was a translation of the native Korean Isadal, the capital of Joseon, Isa being a hypothetical Altaic root word for morning, and Dal meaning mountain, a common ending for Goryeo place names. An early attempt to translate these characters into English gave rise to the expression the land of the morning calm for Korea, which parallels the expression the land of the rising sun for Japan. While the wording is fanciful, the essence of the translation is valid. Han, around the time of Joseon's fall, various chiefdoms in southern Korea grouped into confederacies, collectively called the Samhan. Han is a native Korean root for leader, or great, as in Maripgan, Hanabi, and Hanbat. It may be related to the Mongol Turkic title Khan. Han was transliterated in Chinese records as I, R to the first, Ash, R squared, or E 1/4 cent, but is unrelated to the Chinese people and states also called Han, which is a different character pronounced with a different tone. The Han dynasty did have an influence on the three Han as Chinese characters were eventually used called Hanja. Goryeo. Around the beginning of the Common Era, remnants of the fallen Joseon were reunited and expanded by the Kingdom of Goryeo, one of the three kingdoms of Korea. It, too, was a native Korean word, probably pronounced something like Guri, transcribed with various Hanja characters, Ea iota, Ea 3/4 E, or Ee section E, Ee cent, or an iota. The source native name is thought to be either Guru or Gori. The theory that Goryeo referenced the founder's surname has been largely discredited. Revival of the names in the south, the Samhan resolved into the kingdoms of Baekje and Silla, constituting, with Goryeo, the three kingdoms of Korea. In 668, Silla unified the three kingdoms, and reigned as unified Silla until 935. The succeeding dynasty called itself Goryeo, in reference to Goryeo. Through the Silk Road trade routes, Muslim merchants brought knowledge about Silla and Goryeo to India and the Middle East. Goryeo was transliterated into Italian as Corli, the name Marco Polo used when mentioning the country in his travels, derived from the Chinese form Gaola. From Corli eventually came the English names Korea, and the now standard Korea. In 1392, a new dynasty established by a military coup revived the name Joseon. The Hanja were often translated into English as Morning Calm Sun, and Korea's English nickname became the Land of the Morning Calm. However, This interpretation is not often used in the Korean language, and is more familiar to Koreans as a back translation from English. This nickname was coined by Percival Lowell in his book, Chosån, The Land of the Morning Calm, published in 1885. In 1897, the nation was renamed Hanguk. Han had been selected in reference to Samhan, which was synonymous with Samguk, three kingdoms of Korea, at that time. So, Hanguk means it is an empire that rules the area of three kingdoms of Korea. This name was used to emphasize independence of Korea, because an empire can't be a subordinate country. 20th century when the Korean Empire came under Japanese rule in 1910, the name reverted to Joseon. During this period, many different groups outside of Korea fought for independence, the most notable being the Daehanminguk Imseonbu, literally the provisional government of the Great Han People's Nation, known in English as the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea. Korea became independent after World War II and the country was then divided. In 1948, the South adopted the provisional government's name of Daehanminguk, known in English as the Republic of Korea. Meanwhile, the North became the Chosŏn Minjura Inmin Hanguk, literally the Chosŏn Democratic People Republic, known in English as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The name itself was adopted from the short-lived People's Republic of Korea formed in Seoul after liberation and later added the word democratic to its title. Current usage East Asia Korea, today, South Koreans use Hanguk to refer to just South Korea or Korea as a whole, Namhan for South Korea, and Bukhan for North Korea. South Korea less formally refers to North Korea as Abuk. In addition, the official name for the Republic of Korea in the Korean language is Daehanminguk. North Koreans use Choseon, Namjoseon, and Bikoseon when referring to Korea, South Korea, and North Korea, respectively. The term Bikoseon, however, is rarely used in the North, although it may be found in the Song of General Kim Il-sung. In the tourist regions in North Korea and the official meetings between South Korea and North Korea, Namchuk and Bakchuk, or Southern Side, and Northern Side, are used instead of Namhan and Bukhan. The Korean language is called Hangugeo or Hangukmal in the south and Choseonmal or Choseonam in the north. The Korean script is called Hangeul in South Korea and Choseon in North Korea. The Korean peninsula is called Hanbando in the south and Choseonpando in the north. Chinese-speaking areas in Chinese-speaking areas such as mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau and Taiwan, different naming conventions on several terms have been practiced according to their political proximity to whichever Korean government, although there is a growing trend for convergence. In the Chinese language, the Korean peninsula is usually called Kaoksikenba-ndco and in rare cases called Hawenba-ndco. Ethnic Koreans are also called Kaoksikenza, instead of Da-Hawenma-nza. However, the term Hanguk-ren may be used to specifically refer to South Koreans. Before establishing diplomatic relations with South Korea, the People's Republic of China tended to use the historic Korean name Kaoksiken, by referring to South Korea as now Kaoksiken. Since diplomatic ties were restored, China has used the names that each of the two sides prefer, by referring to North Korea as Kaoksiken and to South Korea as Hanguk. The Korean language can be referred to as either Kaoksiknik, or Hanik. The Korean War is also referred as Kaoksikenza-nzhang in official documents, but it is also popular to use Ha-nzhang colloquially. Taiwan, on the other hand, uses the South Korean names, referring to North Korean as Ba-ha-en and South Korean as Na-en-han. The Republic of China previously maintained diplomatic relations with South Korea, but has never had relations with North Korea. As a result, in the past, Hanguk had been used to refer to the whole Korea, and Taiwanese textbooks treated Korea as a unified nation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of China under the Democratic Progressive Party government considered North and South Korea as two separate countries. However, general usage in Taiwan is still to refer to North Korea as Ba-ha-en and South Korea as Na-en-han, while use of Kaoksiken is generally limited to ancient Korea. The Korean language is usually referred to as Hanguk. Similarly, general usage in Hong Kong and Macau has traditionally referred to North Korea as Bakon and South Korea as Nam Honorable under the influence of official usage, which is itself influenced by the official usage of the People's Republic of China government. The mainland practice of naming the two Koreas differently has become more common. In the Chinese language used in Singapore and Malaysia, North Korea is usually called Kaoksiken with Bari Kaoksiken and Baha-en less often used, while South Korea is usually called Hanbwa cubed with Nawen Han and Nawen Kaoksiken less often used. The above usage pattern does not apply for Korea-derived words. For example, Korean ginseng is commonly called ga-ol-sha-en. Japan. In Japan, the name preferred by each of the two sides for itself is used, so that North Korea is called Kitaka-sen and South Korea Kankokyu. However, North Koreans claim the name Kitaka-sen is derogatory, as it only refers to the northern part of Korean peninsula, whereas the government claims the sovereignty over its whole territory. Pro-North people such as Chongryon use the name Kyawa-Kokyu instead, but the ambiguous name is not popular among others. In 1972 Chongryon campaigned to get the Japanese media to stop referring to North Korea as Kitaka-sen. This effort was not successful, but as a compromise most media companies agreed to refer to the nation with its full official title at least once in every article, thus they used the lengthy Kitaka-sen North Chosŭn. From January 2003, this policy started to be abandoned by most newspapers and TV stations, on the basis that other nations with naming issues such as South Korea and Taiwan are not necessarily referred to by their official names. For Korea as a whole, Ka-sen is commonly used. The term Ka-sen, which has a longer usage history, continues to be used to refer to the Korean peninsula, the Korean ethnic group, and the Korean language, which are use cases that won't cause confusion between Korea and North Korea. When referring to both North Korean and South Korean nationals, the transcription of phonetic English Korean may be used because a reference to a Ka-sen national may be interpreted as a North Korean national instead. The Korean language is most frequently referred to in Japan as Kankokugo or Ka-sengo. While academia mostly prefers Ka-sengo, Kankokugo became more and more common in non-academic fields, thanks to the economic and cultural presence of South Korea. The language is also referred to as various terms, such as Kankokucho-sengo, Ka-sen Kankokugo, etc. Some people refer to the language as Koryago. This term is not used in ordinary Japanese, but was selected as a compromise to placate both nations in a euphemistic process called kotoba-gari. Likewise, when NHK broadcasts a language instruction program for Korean, the language is referred to as Hangurugo. Although it's technically incorrect since Hangul itself is a writing system, not a language. Some argue that even Hangurugo is not completely neutral, since North Korea calls the letter Chosŭn L, not Hangul. Urimarup, a direct transcription of Urimal, is sometimes used by Korean residents in Japan, as well as by KBS World Radio. This term, however, may not be suitable to ethnic Japanese whose language is not necessarily Korean. In Japan, those who move to Japan usually maintain their distinctive cultural heritages. Ethnic Korean residents of Japan have been collectively called Zainichi Kasenjin, regardless of nationality. However, for the same reason as above, the euphemism Zainichi Korean is increasingly used today. Zainichi itself is also often used colloquially. People with North Korean nationality are called Zainichi Kasenjin, while those with South Korean nationality, sometimes including recent newcomers, are called Zainichi Kankokjin. Mongolia, Mongols have their own word for Korea, th3/4 th3/4 th1/2 th3 th3/4 In Mongolian, Solongo means rainbow. And another theory is probably means derived from Solon tribe living in Manchuria, a tribe culturally and ethnically related to the Korean people. North and South Korea are, accordingly, th pi 3/4 th to the first th 3/4 th 3/4 th 1/2 th cubed th 3/4 n and od 1/4 th 1/2 od th 3/4 th 3/4 th 1/2 th cubed th 3/4 n. Other theory, the name of either Silla or its capital Shura-Beol was also widely used throughout Northeast Asia as the ethnonym for the people of Silla, appearing as Solgo or Solo in the language of the medieval Jurchens and their later descendants, the Manchus respectively. Vietnamese-speaking areas: in Vietnam, people call North Korea Trieu Tia N and South Korea Hoen Quay Si. Prior to unification, North Vietnam used Ba Si Trieu Tia N and Nam Trieu Tia N, while South Vietnam used Ba Si Hoen and Nam Hoen for North and South Korea, respectively. After unification, the Northern Vietnamese terminology persisted until the 1990s. When South Korea re-established diplomatic relations with Vietnam in 1993, it requested that Vietnam use the name that it uses for itself, and Hoen Quay Si gradually replaced Nam Trieu Tia N in usage. In the Vietnamese language used in the United States, Ba Si Hoen and Nam Hoen are most common used. Outside East Asia equals. English usage: both South and North Korea use the name Korea when referring to their countries in English. North Korea is sometimes referred to as Korea DPR, and South Korea is sometimes referred to as the Korea Republic, especially in international sporting competitions, such as FIFA football. As with other European languages, English historically had a variety of names for Korea derived from Marco Polo's rendering of Goryeo, Corley. These included Kor, Kori, Kali, and Korai, as well as two spellings that survived into the 19th century, Korea and Korea. Despite the coexistence of the spellings Korea and Korea in 19th century English publications, some Koreans believe that Japan, around the time of the Japanese occupation, intentionally standardized the spelling on Korea, so that Japan would appear first alphabetically. Both major English-speaking governments of the time used both Korea and Korea until the early part of the colonial period. English-language publications in the 19th century generally used the spelling Korea, which was also used at the founding of the British Embassy in Seoul in 1890. However, the U.S. Minister and Consul General to Korea, Horace Newton Allen, used Korea in his works published on the country. At the official Korean exhibit at the World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago in 1893, a sign was posted by the Korean commissioner saying of his country's name that Korea and Korea are both correct, but the former is preferred. This may have had something to do with Allen's influence, as he was heavily involved in the planning and participation of the Korean exhibit at Chicago. A shift can also be seen in Korea itself, where postage stamps issued in 1884 used the name Korean Post in English, but those from 1885 and thereafter used Korea, or Korean Post. Names of Korea on 19th-century Korean stamps. By the first 2 decades of the 20th century, Korea began to be seen more frequently than Korea, a change that coincided with Japan's consolidation of its grip over the peninsula. Most evidence of a deliberate name change orchestrated by Japanese authorities is circumstantial, including a 1912 memoir by a Japanese colonial official that complained of the Koreans' tendency to maintain they are an independent country by insisting on using a C to write their country's name. However, the spelling Korea was occasionally used even under full colonial rule, and both it and Korea were largely eschewed in favor of the Japanese-derived Chosån, which itself was derived from Joseon. Other languages, European languages, use variations of the name Korea for both North and South Korea. In general, Celtic and Romance languages spell it Korea since C represents the sound in most Romance and Celtic orthographies. However, Germanic and Slavic languages largely use variants of Korea since, in many of these languages, C represents other sounds such as. In languages using other alphabets such as Russian, variations phonetically similar to Korea are also used. For example, the Russian name for Korea is THSH 3/4 N Euro TH micron N, Romanization Korea. Outside of Europe, most languages also use variants of Korea, often adopted to local orthographies. Korea in the Joseon national language is Sogo. Koreans abroad immigrants who moved to Russia and Central Asia call themselves Goryeo or Koryo, or th 3/4 n euro th micron th to the first nn in Russian. Many Goryeo are living in the CIS, including an estimated 106,852 in Russia, 22,000 in Uzbekistan, 20,000 in Kyrgyzstan, 17,460 in Kazakhstan, 8,669 in Ukraine, 2,000 in Belarus, 350 in Moldova, 250 in Georgia, 100 in Azerbaijan, and 30 in Armenia. As of 2005, there are also 1.9 million ethnic Koreans living in China who hold Chinese citizenship and a further 560,000 Korean expatriates from both North and South living in China. South Korean expatriates living in the United States, around 1.7 million, will refer to themselves as Gyeomi, Gyeopo, or sometimes simply Gyeopo for short. Sobriquets for Korea, in traditional Korean culture, as well as in the cultural tradition of East Asia, the land of Korea has assumed a number of sobriquets over the centuries, including E-Jirim, rooster forest, in reference to an early name for Silla. E-micron degree II section euro E-micron Ginjoji Gaik, or land of scholarly gentlemen, EIE degree I degree James Su Gangsan, land of embroidered rivers and mountains, E4 micron Donjuk, country of Dangun, EO euro E unregistered trademark Dedong, Great East, E unregistered trademark E micron Dongguk, Eastern country, E unregistered trademark E degree copyright Dongbang, literally an eastern country referring to Korea. E unregistered trademark E degree 6 II section euro E micron Dongbang Yuuiji Gaik, Eastern country of courtesy, E unregistered trademark I1/4 Dongya, Eastern Plains, E unregistered trademark I Dongyi, or Eastern foreigners, E micron Gaiyi, 9yi, refers to ancient tribes in the Korean peninsula. E unregistered trademark I Dongto, Eastern land, E degree E Bedol, an ancient reference to Korea. E degree plus or minus IE1/4 I Baguaminjok, the white-clad people, I1/4 I squared OA 3000 Ri, a reference to the length traditionally attributed to the country from its northern to southern tips plus eastern to western tips. IOA currency I unregistered trademark Sejunghwa, small China, or Little Sinocentrism was used by the Joseon court. It is nowadays considered degrading and is not used. II saddle, apparently an Old Korean term for Joseon. I squared micron Kyenggu, or Azure Hills. The color azure is associated with the east. IOE degree I degree Paldo Gangsan, rivers and mountains of the 8 provinces, referring to the traditional 8 provinces of Korea. E1/4 I unregistered trademark ING Unweyang, country of Mugunghwa refer to Silla Kingdom. E1/4 I, Gunyeok, Hibiscus territory, or land of hibiscus, I1/4 I Samhan, or Three Hands, refers to Samhan Confederacy that ruled southern Korea. I.e. unregistered trademark Hwedong, east of the sea, i.e. unregistered trademark I1/4 E micron Hwedong Samguk, Three Kingdoms east of the sea refers to Three Kingdoms of Korea, i.e. unregistered trademark I plus or minus E micron Hwedong Sunguk, literally flourishing eastern sea country, historically refers to Bali Kingdom of North-South period. I section E micron Jinuk, Shok country, old name of Bali Kingdom. I section I, Jinyeok, Eastern Domain, I section E Jindan, Eastern country of Dangun, I section E micron Jinuk, country of early morning, refer to the Jin state of Gojoseon period. See also, History of Korea, Korean Romanization. Notes